Okay, so welcome to Trench 4, which is the second of the two trenches we put in this time. One of the things that we were asked to do by Historic England was discover the character, if we could, of this part of the town. And I think the important thing that we found is that we've lost later than the early 3rd century due to the ploughing and the truncation of the archaeology and the later ground levelling. So what we're looking at is phases of 2nd century archaeology on the whole, with some early 3rd possibly as well. And what's really interesting is that we know that Corbridge town to the south got going in the mid to late 2nd century, and it seems that it was just as busy, and there was just as much going on here to the north, which makes it quite an extensive and very intense settlement. What we've got in Trench 4 primarily is the road. You can see it running near west-east here, and it takes, according to geophysics, it takes a turn and heads off towards the town to the south. Deer Street is just beyond that line of trees. So we're not right on Deer Street, but we're very close. And we found as we dug down into the road surfaces that there are at least 2 and probably 3 versions of the road. And we're looking down on one of the earliest version, but in this little exploratory slot, what we found was that the surface of the road extended beyond a ditch and joined up with some other archaeology that was still lying deep beneath the corner of the trench over there. And you can see the massive stones that have been used to create a channel on one side of the second version of the road. And the final phase of the road, which you can see mostly in this middle bit here, has been extensively damaged by the later ploughing. You can see how close it is to the surface. And then if you look at the middle slot through the road, you can see how deep the surfaces are. And we're looking at probably the lowest, although we haven't taken all of this out, and actually narrower version of the road, or at least further north version of the road. So the road shifts slightly. And part of the reason for that may be that there was a hiatus when this spine of road wasn't actually being used, because we got structural elements, bits of wall foundations coming in through that northeast corner over an earlier version of the road and under the latest surviving version of the road. And you can see the large stones of some kind of either foundation or surface going well south of the road. And just to the south of that, the rather bedraggled remains of a structural, a wall. It might be slightly curved or straight and just has been hit by the plough, and that again is an earlier phase of structure. After the hiatus, we see another little structure built on top of that, which did have a slightly curved aspect to it, probably the base of some kind of workshop or storage area building. And then if we come into this northwest corner, here you can see the middle version of the road, the hardcore underneath the surface, and then just to the south, just fall over the good, just to the south, a water conduit. Now this has runs through to just beyond where the furthest flag is, and there is actually a feeder into it underneath the road. And it then turns around and comes through this lovely stone coursed conduit. And the normal road ditch feeds on through, carries on towards the east. Now, we thought maybe the conduit had existed further and had been robbed out, but actually looking at it more closely, it seems that that's not the case, and that actually the conduit begins here and carries on presumably towards the turn of the road just to our west. This southwest area proved to be very interesting. We suspect that in an earlier phase this was the back of a large house to the east, which showed up on the geophysics and has been, as I said, some kind of workshop. But there is this period, this sort of hiatus period between the earlier structures we're picking up and the later 2 phases, where it seems that this was no longer used and became partly a dump for midden material, rubbish material and broken pottery, and a number of pits have been cut into that. And in this big pit here, we found a large greyware vessel, about 60 centimetres across at least, which was likely intact and full only of soil and burnt bone, which we 100% sampled and would be analysed. But it was packed round with Samian vessels and other fine wares and greyware and black burnished ware in the sort of lobes of the pit. So that's a pit cut into the rubbish, and there were more of them here, and you can see the part of a little one here with another ditch running through the site, which is earlier than this hiatus and later than that little structure over there, because it cuts straight through it. You can see it's a complex area with lots of phases, and that suggests that this has been used intensely for quite a long period. And finally, in the southeast corner, we've got the late flagging, which corresponds to the late cobbled surfaces and the final version of the road that we have surviving. Underneath that, we've got the coursing of a considerable wall, which presumably is the building to the east. And in that corner, we found a lot of amphorae, montaria, and a range of fineware sherds, so that we've got a sort of high-class establishment to the east, with a sort of backyard doing all sorts of more functional things this side, but then with a hiatus between the structures that are still lying beneath this. We haven't reached the natural anywhere, and the later phases in this area where maybe the town contracted or changed shape, and you had this rubbish pit area with this interesting large pit with the vessel in it. So lots of things to think about in the next post-excavation stage, but very exciting, and certainly has fulfilled the Historic England brief. And Kathryn and I want to say thank you to you all for a fabulous season.
Hi everyone, welcome to Corbridge. It's our last day on site. We're going to be backfilling in just a couple hours, and I thought I'd give you a quick look around what we found over the last 3 weeks. So we've done a massive amount of work. It was quite hot, but the weather was on our side, and we've found some really exciting and interesting stuff on site. So this is Trench 5. In 2019 there was a small 1 meter by 5 meter trench in here, running from about here and just across, and picking up this bit of wall. So we can see we've opened up quite a bit larger of an area this year. So we've got, you can see the outline of a building. This would have been a rubble foundation building with then a timber structure and roof on top of it. And it's based on what we're seeing, it's kind of a general workshop. There's no one industry that's appearing in a high enough concentration to indicate a specific purpose, but we're kind of getting bits of everything to kind of show us that this just sort of general working area. But what we're seeing here is that with these walls, we've got the east, north, and the west wall. Those have two phases of construction, so we're sort of seeing two different methods of construction within those foundations, so that the building has been rebuilt at least once. And we think it probably was open-fronted, so just three-sided, open-fronted onto the Roman street, which I'm standing on just here under the ground. And at some point they've then put this fourth wall across on the south side, and that's cut through an earlier pit. We've got this area here was this sort of circular area of stones with a yellow clay lining, and that's been cut into an earlier oven or hearth feature, which if I come around, you can see all the burnt clay coming through, and that ran underneath this as well. So we've got a nice feature there. We've got another possible hearth here in the middle. We have the stones coming around here with quite a lot of sort of burnt material in that. There's a small trough running across the site there. And the other thing we found is that as we've dug through the wall foundations here in the western wall, is that we've actually come down onto another wall on a slightly different alignment. So there's further archaeology well below where we're digging. So that will be something that maybe will need to be investigated in the future. And the last thing that's quite exciting about this trench is that in the last few days we put in these sort of exploratory trenches just to the east of the workshop, and it appears that we've found this sort of domestic area So we've got some flagging, so possibly a floor or a paved area outside the building, and maybe have picked up just the edge of a wall here. But the finds that are coming out of these two trenches are quite nice, and definitely sort of leaning towards a female presence as well. So we've got a melon bead, a nice decorative silver piece, a hairpin, part of a brooch, and part of a really nice blue glass bracelet. So we're seeing some really exciting stuff kind of just on the edge of where we've been digging. But yeah, so that's trench 5. It's been very good, and it'll all go back under the ground in just a couple hours.